That's the sound we are recreating in Serum today. If you like it, make sure to subscribe, press the notification bell so you see all of our videos, and hit like on the video. What's up guys, this is Tassio with Cymatics, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make the bass from the Flume song More Than You Thought. So first I'm going to play the original, then I'm going to play what we have. So this is what we're going to be making. Just that bass right there in the middle. So this is our version. Alright, so before we get into it, I just want to let you guys know that in the description there is a download for this project file, which will include the preset. So I definitely recommend you guys getting that and following along with me. But first, let me just mention as well that this patch is actually broken down into two patches, one that is the bass and one that is the sub. So the sub is just a recreation or a duplication of the original patch, but everything is turned off except for the sub oscillator, and that is selected direct out, so it's bypassing the filter and all the effects. So if you just play that, you should be hearing. So for this tutorial, I'm going to keep it off until the very end, so we'll be recreating this. Alright, so first thing we're going to want to do is create a new MIDI track and duplicate this MIDI down so it's exactly the same, and we're going to open up Serum. For this patch, we're going to be using oscillator A, oscillator B, and the noise oscillator. So for oscillator A, we're going to select saw rounded to square. Oscillator B is going to stay a saw wave, and the noise oscillator is going to be SID noise. So before we do anything, let's go ahead and adjust these levels. We're going to turn oscillator A down a little. We're going to turn oscillator B down all the way because we're actually going to feed it through oscillator A by using the warp mode FM from B. And then we're going to turn this noise down to around right here. So now we should be hearing. So let's set up our oscillators. Oscillator A is going to be down an octave, and we're going to bring the voices or the unison up to 5, which means that this oscillator will be playing 5 versions of this voice, all at different tunes. That is where this detune knob comes in. This yellow bar in the middle is the perfectly tuned voice, and the green bars on the outside are the out of tune voices. So the 2 green bars on the right are slightly higher tune. The 2 green bars on the left are slightly lower tune. So by sliding this knob up and down, we're actually moving these voices farther apart in tune. So we're going to keep it to around right there. So now you should be hearing. And you'll hear, since it's really low and all the voices are in different tunes, they're actually phasing each other in and out. So it's kind of like, sounds like it's bouncing around your headphones, and it's kind of super wide. And the next thing we're going to do is take this blend knob and turn it all the way up, which means that the perfectly in tune voice is slightly quieter than all the out of tune voices. So you should be hearing something very, very similar. And then what we're going to do is leave this phase knob here, but we're actually going to modulate that later, and we're going to turn this random knob down to around 11 o'clock. And this is basically just minimizing how random the phase can be. We're going to leave the wavetable position right around here, and we are going to take this warp mode right here and select FM from B. And we'll get to that later when we start getting to our envelopes, what we should modulate. But for right now, this is all going to sound the same because this value is at 0. For oscillator B, we're going to leave this octave at the same, but we're going to drag this fine tune up a little bit. We're going to drag it up to 13 cents. We're going to leave the voices where it is, the detune where it is, the blend where it is, the phase. All these knobs are going to stay exactly the same. All right, and for this warp mode, we are going to select bend minus. And basically what this is doing is, if you imagine this little sliver of the wavetable, bend minus is just going to be pushing it to the outside. So you're getting this sort of like rounded saw wave right here. So we're not going to be hearing anything different from this because all of these values for the warp mode are at 0. But now let's do something about that. So let's start making our envelopes. We're going to have 3 envelopes that are all going to be automating different things, but let's select envelope 1 right now and work on that. Envelope 1 is the overall volume envelope for the entire synth. So for envelope 1, we're going to keep the attack right here. Take the decay down to around 347. That's good. And we're going to take the sustain down all the way. Then we're going to take this curve thing and we're going to slide it all the way up to the top so it's like that. So now we should be hearing. So you can just hear it start to decay towards the end. Envelope 2 is going to be what's going to be doing the majority of our modulation. And we're going to drag the attack of envelope 2 up to 284. Here's a great trick actually while we're in the middle of this. If you go to your global tab and you type in, double click for typable values on controls, if you have this selected, then cool. If you don't, click that and then hit save right here to save your preferences. So I didn't change anything, so it's not saving, but you can actually go in and type in 284. So it's literally going to be perfect. The decay will be 65 and the sustain will be 0. That's a lot quicker than dragging these knobs. So we're going to take this curve and drag it all the way up to here, and we're going to drag this curve just down slightly. So now we should be hearing the exact same thing because envelope 2 is not modulating anything. Envelope 3 is going to be very similar to envelope 2. So we're going to make the attack 253 milliseconds. The decay will be 100 milliseconds, and the sustain will be like 98. And we are going to make this curve slightly down. So now that our envelopes are all there, let's start mapping them. So envelope 1 is going to be mapped to the FM from B knob. And we're going to drag this range down until it says 16. That is all envelope 1 is going to be modulating besides the overall volume. So let's get envelope 3 out of the way as well, because envelope 3 is only going to be modulating one thing, and that is the noise pitch. So right now when we drag envelope 3 on, it is going both ways, and we do not want that. We're going to select shift and option and click on that so it's only going one way. And also while we're here, we're going to want to select this button so it's a one shot and it's not a looping sound, and the key tracking button. And we're going to drag this pitch up to 7% and drag the range down to 16. So now we should be hearing. Still very similar because there's not a ton of volume right here. For envelope 2, we are going to go back to the noise oscillator and actually drag the volume all the way down and drag this range to around right here. And that'll just give it like a tiny bit of volume right there. So you can hear it pulsing in later. We're also going to take envelope 2 and drag it to the wavetable position of oscillator A and drag this range down to 3. So now you should be hearing. So still very, very similar. What's really going to take this sound home is when we get to the filters and the effects. So then we're going to take envelope 2 and drag it to the phase knob. And again, it's going both ways. We want it to go one way by hitting shift, option, click. And we're going to drag this range to -32. So now we should be hearing. Still very, very similar. All right, now it's time to get into the filter. So we're going to turn the filter on and select A and N for the noise oscillators. And then while we're at it, we're going to select key tracking because we want this filter to follow our key. Like whatever note we're playing, we want it to follow that note. So we're going to drag envelope 2 onto the cutoff, and we want it to go one way. And we're going to drag this down to 145, and I can't get there, so let's type it in, 145, and we're going to drag this range to 44. So now we should be hearing. So you can hear it kind of like filtering up a little bit. Then we're going to drag envelope 2 to the resonance part of the filter, which is basically boosting the curve. So where this line will go down and bend, which is cutting off the highs, the resonance will boost it up and make like a sharp point. So we are going to drag this to 23% and make this range go to 45. So as this envelope moves, the resonance will boost. So you can hear it there a little bit. The next thing we're going to do is bring the drive to 10% and turn the fat all the way up to 100%. And this is just going to beef it up and kind of overdrive the filter. So it kind of just gives it a really nice quality and just like kind of compresses it and brings in some overtones. And then we're going to take envelope 2 and put it on the mix of the filter and drag that down to -35-ish. So now as this sound is moving, the filter is kind of letting, pulling back a little bit. And one last thing I forgot to do to the oscillator, and I always kind of pass this, is I'm going to drag this fine tune up 13 cents, and this is just going to give it like a cool kind of phase. So it's kind of hard to hear, but it is doing something slight. So that's it for all the oscillators on the oscillator tab, except for one thing. We're going to change this from polyphonic to mono and legato, so only one note can play at a time. And now it's time to move into our effects. So our first effect we're going to do is the hyper and dimension. And this is basically just going to give your sound a nice stereo image. So we're going to change this mix down to around 15% because we don't want it to be that high. I'll play this and I'll kind of like play around with this so you can hear what it does. This is basically like detuning your sound and making it a little bit wider. It's like very wide right there, and we don't want that, so we're going to take that to 15%. We're going to bring this detune to 25%, which it already is, and this rate is going to be at 16%, which it already is. So that's good right there. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take this dimension, the mix, to 15%, and the size to 20%. And this is basically just adding a small delay from the left to the right, which is making the sound a little bit bigger, like it's almost reflecting off something. Our next plugin is going to be the distortion, and we're going to bring that to soft clip. So you should be hearing. So this is kind of like taming the sound and sort of like compressing it and bringing out some overtones. So we're going to select this pre, which is like a pre-filter, and we're going to drag this all the way up to high pass. And we're going to double click on frequency and bring it to 156. So we're cutting out a lot of the sub frequencies. And then we're going to take this Q and type in 0.4, so it's a little bit more mellow. We're going to bring this drive all the way up and the mix down to around 68. So now you should be hearing. But then what we're going to do is we are going to take envelope 2 and drag it onto this mix knob, so it's modulating the mix. So it's like really kind of taming the sound, just giving it more volume control. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add an EQ. And for this EQ, we're going to add this low cut, and we're going to take the frequency to 90. So we're cutting out those sub frequencies, and we're going to bring this Q from 60% to 40%. So it's rounding off the edges. And then we're going to keep this second EQ a high shelf, and we're going to leave the frequency right there at 2041. We're going to take the Q and bring it down to 20, so it's very mellow. And we're going to boost this 8 decibels, so it looks something like that. So now you should be hearing. See, you can hear all the lows being cut. So before this, the EQ and the saturator, or the distortion, you hear a lot of sub bass. But when you add those two, the sub bass is now gone. And that's going to be basically replaced by this sub down here. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a filter, and we are going to select the multi and go down to PP12, and we're going to double click on our cutoff to select our frequency and go to 1695. So now you should be hearing. And we're going to take envelope 2 and drag this down to 6. So it's not really doing a whole lot of movement, but it still is. Then we are going to take the resonance and double click and type in 40, and then drag in envelope 2 and set the range to 49. So now you should be hearing. You're kind of getting that, like it's like a sort of a whistle sound at the end right there. Then we're going to take the second part of the filter and bring this frequency knob all the way up, and then turn the mix down to 90. So now you should be hearing. And basically what this frequency is doing is, this is like the second part of the filter. So it's hard to see on here, but over here, when you go to the multi and you go to PP12, this second frequency knob is like a second peak. So let's bring it back to what we had before. So now we're back to. So the next thing we're going to add is a reverb. And when you first bring it on, this is how it's going to sound. But we're going to bring the size down to 20, the decay down to 1.2. And if you were to type 1.2, it would go to milliseconds. So we're going to type in SEC for seconds. and it'll bring it right there. So you should be hearing. We're going to bring the low cut to 29%, the high cut to 13%. And the low cut is basically the farther we drag it up, the more lows it's cutting out of the reverb, and that'll help clear up your sound, get rid of some mud. And then we're actually turning this high cut down, allowing more of the highs in. Then we're going to take the spin to 35% and the spin depth to 12%. And we should be hearing. And then we're going to take this mix up to 35% and just make the reverb a little bit more present. Then the last plugin we're going to add for the chain is a compressor, and we're not going to select multiband. So you should be hearing, and it's not doing anything because it's not hitting the threshold. So we're going to actually change the threshold to negative 35.7 and take the ratio down to 2.2/1. And we should be hearing. So it's very lightly hitting the threshold. So then we're going to shorten the attack and the release. We're going to take the attack to 16.6 and change the release to 25.6. And this is basically, it's the compressor, as soon as the signal is hitting the threshold, it's coming into action a lot quicker. And then it's also stopping a lot quicker when the signal leaves. And then we're going to take this gain to 21.3. And let me warn you, this is going to be really loud. So let's remember where our master volume's at 70. I'm going to play this and bring it in slowly. So I'll leave it right there just so we're not blowing our ears out. But that's a little bit of makeup gain for you right there. Other than that, we are done. The only thing we need to do is copy this saturator over to our new track. So, I mean, we are right in the money. If you want to get it any closer, we could certainly fiddle around with this till for forever. But we are right there, and that is that. So I hope you guys learned a lot from this video. Definitely be sure to download the project and the patch if you already didn't. And if you haven't, I definitely would recommend you downloading it and going back through this video and recreating it. But anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you learned a lot. I am Tassione, and this is Cymatics.